Walk out before I embarrass you, old man. My name is Stephen. I'm 51 and I spent 12 years in Special Forces before settling into civilian life in Denver, Colorado. The kid flexing his arms at me thinks those muscles make him dangerous. His name is Jake and he's been training my wife Diana for 3 months now. Personal training sessions that run long. Text messages at odd hours. The kind of attention that makes a husband notice things. I stood in the doorway of PowerFlex Gym, watching him approach me with that swagger young men get when they think they own the world. The evening crowd was thick around us, office workers burning off stress, college kids showing off for each other. Everyone could see this confrontation building. "You're not man enough for her," Jake continued, his voice carrying across the weight room. He wanted an audience. Wanted witnesses to see him humiliate the old husband who couldn't keep his woman satisfied. I didn't respond, just walked over to a bench and sat down, started untying my work boots. The leather laces were worn but dependable, like everything else I preferred in life. Jake followed me, growing bolder with each step, interpreting my silence as weakness. "Diana told me all about you," he said, positioning himself where the mirror would catch his profile. "How you've gotten soft. How you don't take care of yourself anymore." The gym members were starting to gather. I could feel their eyes, their phones probably recording already. Social media loved this kind of drama. Older man getting schooled by young trainer. The story would write itself. I pulled off my right boot, set it carefully beside the bench. Jake was still talking, building his performance for the crowd. He had good muscle definition, probably spent 2 hours a day maintaining that physique. Clean diet, proper supplementation, all the visible markers of fitness that impressed people who didn't know the difference between looking strong and being strong. "Last chance, old man," Jake said, cracking his knuckles. "Walk away, and maybe I'll let Diana down easy when she asks about you later." I started working on my left boot, taking my time with the laces. The crowd was getting restless. They wanted action, wanted to see what happened when youth met age, when new money met old pride. What they didn't understand was that they'd already missed the most important part. The moment Jake decided to make this public, he'd already lost. I finished with the laces and looked up at him for the first time since walking in. "You done talking, son?" Diana and I met 15 years ago when I was transitioning out of the military. She was working as a bank manager, all professional smiles and sharp business suits. I was drawn to her confidence, the way she handled difficult customers with patience I envied. We married after 2 years, bought a house in Highlands Ranch, started talking about kids that never came. The military had taught me to read situations, to notice when patterns changed. Diana's patterns had been shifting for months, longer hours at the gym, new clothes that showed more skin, a distance in her voice when she talked about her day. I'd mentioned it once, gently, and she'd brushed it off as midlife fitness goals. Jake Rodriguez had appeared in our conversations gradually, first as the new trainer at the gym, then as, "Jake says this exercise is better," then as late-night texts she claimed were workout schedules. I'd been deployed in enough hostile territories to recognize when someone was gathering intelligence on my position. 3 weeks ago, I'd driven by the gym during what should have been Diana's session time. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. When I asked about it later, she said she'd switched to morning workouts, but her gym bag was still in the closet, unused, and she came home smelling like perfume instead of sweat. I'd started paying attention then, really paying attention the way I used to watch for insurgent movement patterns in Kandahar. Diana would shower immediately when she got home. Even though she claimed to have showered at the gym, she'd put her phone face down during dinner, something she'd never done before. Small tells, but consistent. Yesterday, I'd seen them together at a coffee shop downtown. Not the gym, not a training session. Diana laughing at something Jake said, her hand touching his arm in a way that wives don't touch their trainers. They hadn't seen me, but I'd seen enough. Jake probably thought he was the first young man to catch an older woman's attention, thought his youth and muscles gave him some advantage I'd lost. What he didn't understand was that Special Forces training wasn't just about physical conditioning. It was about patience, about waiting for exactly the right moment to apply exactly the right amount of pressure. The warning signs had been there for months, but I'd ignored them, trusted where I should have verified, given Diana the benefit of doubt when the doubt was warranted. That was on me. But Jake's mistake was bigger. He'd made this personal, made it public, made it about respect. I stood up from the bench, my boots properly secured now. Jake was still talking to his audience, still playing the role of the confident young stud. He had no idea that everything he'd just said and done was about to cost him more than he'd ever imagined. "So, what's it going to be, old man?" Jake asked, squaring his shoulders. "You going to do something about it, or just sit there like you do at home?" That last comment hit different. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected. Diana had been talking about our private life, sharing details that belonged between husband and wife, painting me as the neglectful spouse who didn't appreciate what he had. I finished tying my shoes and stood slowly, taking my time to stretch my back. Jake interpreted this as stiffness, age catching up with me. He was half right, I was 51, not 25. But what he didn't understand was that those years had taught me things his gym workouts never could. "Jake," I said, keeping my voice level, "you've been training my wife for 3 months now?" He grinned, thinking I was finally engaging with his game. "That's right, and let me tell you, she's been very dedicated to her workouts." The gym crowd chuckled at the innuendo. Jake played it up, flexing slightly for his audience. He was enjoying this, feeding off their attention, making my humiliation part of his personal brand story. "Dedicated," I repeated, nodding slowly. "That's good. Diana always finishes what she starts." Something in my tone made Jake pause, but he covered it with more bravado. "Maybe you should take some notes, old-timer. Learn what it takes to keep a woman interested." I looked around the gym, taking inventory. 43 people watching, most with phones out. 2 emergency exits, one behind Jake, one to my left. Jake was standing with his weight forward. Typical boxer stance he'd probably learned from YouTube videos. Good for show. Not so good for actual combat. "You know what I learned in 12 years Special Forces, Jake?" I asked, rolling my shoulders to loosen them up. "Patience, how to wait for exactly the right moment." Jake's grin widened. "Special Forces? Right. And I'm a Navy SEAL." The crowd laughed again. Jake had them in his corner, the young bull ready to put the old man in his place. He started moving toward me, probably planning to grab my shirt, maybe push me around a little for the cameras. That's when I smiled. Not the polite smile I'd been wearing since walking in. A different smile. The one my unit used to see right before we cleared a hostile compound. The one that meant planning time was over. "You're right about one thing, Jake," I said, settling into a stance he wouldn't recognize. "This is already over." He threw the first punch, putting all his gym-built muscle behind it, aiming for my jaw in front of 43 witnesses. Poor kid had no idea what he'd just started. Jake's right cross came at me like he'd been practicing it in the mirror, all power and no technique. I shifted my weight slightly to the left, let his fist whistle past my ear by maybe 2 inches. His momentum carried him forward, off balance, and I helped him along with the gentlest touch to his shoulder. He stumbled past me and crashed into the weight rack, 45-pound plates clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the gym like a thunderclap. The crowd erupted in surprised laughter. Jake scrambled to his feet, face red with embarrassment, looking around to see who'd caught his humiliation on video. Which was everyone. "Lucky dodge, old man," he snarled, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. That hadn't gone how he'd planned. "Was it?" I asked, still standing in the same spot. Jake charged again, this time going low for a tackle. Football move, probably worked great against other gym bros who fought like they were in a movie. I simply wasn't there when he arrived. Stepped aside at the last second, used his own momentum to guide him face first into the rowing machine. The impact made a satisfying thunk. Jake bounced off the padded seat and hit the floor hard, his perfect hair messed up now, confusion replacing confidence. "What the hell?" he gasped, pushing himself up on his hands and knees. "You're telegraphing," I said calmly. "Drop your right shoulder before you punch." Lean forward before you charge. Basic mistakes. The gym had gone quiet except for the sound of phones recording. Jake's humiliation was being documented from every angle, his tough guy image crumbling in real time. He looked around desperately, realizing this wasn't going how he'd promised his audience. "Stop moving and fight me like a man," he shouted, lunging again. This time I caught his wrist mid-swing, redirected his energy, and sent him spinning into the leg press machine. He hit it sideways, the crash reverberating through the floor. 2 more gym members had their phones out now, probably streaming live. Jake was breathing hard, sweat starting to show through his tight workout shirt. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by frustration and growing panic. This wasn't the easy victory he'd expected in front of Diana's husband. "How are you doing this?" he demanded, wiping blood from a split lip. 12 years Special Forces, I reminded him. "You thought I was lying about that?" Jake's eyes narrowed. He was starting to understand that he'd miscalculated, but pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of this crowd. Not with everything being recorded. "I don't care what you used to be," he spat. "You're just an old man now." He came at me again, this time with a wild haymaker that would have taken my head off if it connected. Instead, I ducked under it, let him spin himself around, and gave him the slightest push toward the free weights section. Jake crashed into a rack of dumbbells, sending 20 and 25-pounders rolling across the floor. Members scattered to avoid getting hit, their laughter getting louder with each of Jake's failures. "Stay down, son," I suggested. "You're embarrassing yourself." But Jake was beyond listening now. His perfect reputation as the gym's alpha male was disintegrating with every failed attack. He had to land something, anything, to salvage his image. He grabbed a weight off the floor, a 15-pound dumbbell, and came at me swinging it like a club. The crowd gasped. This had gone from embarrassing to dangerous. That's when I stopped playing around. I caught Jake's wrist as he swung the dumbbell, applied pressure to a nerve cluster I'd learned about in advanced combat training. His fingers went numb instantly, the weight dropping to the floor with a heavy thud. "Attempted assault with a weapon," I said quietly, still holding his wrist, in front of 43 witnesses. "You sure you want to go down that road?" Jake's face went pale. He tried to pull away, but my grip was immovable. 12 years of military conditioning versus 3 years of gym workouts. No contest. "Let me go," he whispered, the fight finally draining out of him. I released him and stepped back. Jake cradled his numb hand against his chest, fear replacing the arrogance that had started this whole mess. "You want to know what I really learned in Special Forces, Jake?" I asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How to read people, how to identify threats, how to recognize when someone's been feeding information to the enemy." The gym was dead silent now. Even the background music seemed muted. "See, I've been watching you and my wife for 3 months," I continued. "The coffee dates that weren't training sessions, the late-night texts about workout schedules, the way Diana started showering twice a day and putting her phone face down during dinner." Jake's face went from pale to white. He hadn't expected this conversation to go public. "Diana told you about our private life, didn't she?" I pressed. "About how I work long hours, how I've been distant lately, how the spark has gone out of our marriage." Jake glanced around nervously, looking for an escape route, but the crowd had him surrounded, their phones still recording every word. "What she didn't tell you," I said, "is that I've been working those long hours to pay for her mother's cancer treatments. That I've been distant because I've been researching specialists, coordinating insurance, making sure Eleanor gets the best care possible." The silence stretched. Jake's breathing was shallow, panicked. "Diana doesn't know that yet," I continued. "Wanted to surprise her once everything was arranged, but you know what? I think she deserves to know the truth about both of us." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Diana's number, and hit speakerphone. The ringtone echoed through the gym. "Stephen?" Diana's voice came through crystal clear. "I'm just leaving the office. Is everything okay?" "I'm at Powerflex Gym," I said, keeping my eyes on Jake. "Having a conversation with your trainer." A pause. "Oh, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. Jake here has been very educational. Told me all about your dedication to fitness, how you've been very committed to your workouts. Jake was shaking his head frantically, mouthing no at the phone. Stephen, please. Diana's voice was tight now. Let me come down there and we can talk privately. Actually, I think we're done talking, I said, both of us. Jake was just explaining to everyone here how he's man enough to take another man's wife. Weren't you, Jake? Jake looked like he was going to be sick. The crowd was eating this up, their phones capturing every second of his humiliation. Diana, I continued, you should probably find a new gym. And Jake, you should probably find a new career. I hung up and put the phone away. Jake was backing toward the exit now, his reputation in ruins, his confidence shattered. But I wasn't done with him yet. Where are you going, Jake? I asked as he reached the gym's front door. I thought you wanted to embarrass me. He stopped, hand on the exit handle, trapped between his destroyed reputation and his fear of making things worse. The crowd was still recording, still watching his every move. This is over, he said, his voice barely audible. Just leave me alone. Oh, it's over, I agreed, but not the way you planned. I walked closer, and Jake pressed himself against the door. The confident trainer who'd called me an old man 20 minutes ago was now cowering like a scared kid. You know what's going to happen next? I asked conversationally. Those videos everyone just took, they're already uploading. Social media moves fast these days. Jake's eyes darted to the phone still pointed at him. He was starting to understand the scope of his problem. By tomorrow morning, every gym in Denver is going to know about Jake Rodriguez, the trainer who got humiliated by a 51-year-old man, I continued, the guy who couldn't land a single punch on someone old enough to be his father. You set me up, he whispered. No, son, you set yourself up. I just gave you enough rope. The crowd was loving this. Jake's downfall was being documented from every angle, his tough guy persona permanently destroyed. But I still had one more card to play. Oh, and Jake, I added, you should probably check your employment contract. Most gyms have morality clauses about trainers who sleep with married clients. Bad for business when it becomes public knowledge. Jake's face went ashen. He hadn't thought about that part. Please, he started to say, but I held up a hand. The thing about consequences, Jake, is that they don't care about please. You made your choices. You wanted to be man enough to take another man's wife, to humiliate him in public. Now you get to live with what that costs. I stepped aside, clearing his path to the door. But I'll give you some free advice, I said. Next time you want to steal something from a man, make sure you understand what kind of man you're dealing with first. Jake fumbled with the door handle, desperate to escape. But before he could leave, Diana burst through the entrance, her face flushed from running. Stephen, wait. She started, then stopped when she saw Jake's condition. His split lip, messed up hair, the defeated look in his eyes. What happened? She demanded. Your boyfriend tried to teach me a lesson, I said calmly. Didn't work out how he planned. Diana looked between us, taking in the crowd with their phones, Jake's humiliated state, the weight equipment scattered across the floor. Jake? She said uncertainly. But Jake couldn't meet her eyes. His image as the confident, dominant trainer was shattered. He was just a scared kid who'd gotten in over his head. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, Diana said to me, her voice small. Find out what? I asked. That my wife was cheating on me with a boy who can't even throw a punch? I figured that out months ago. Jake pushed past Diana and fled through the door, leaving her standing there in front of 43 witnesses to their affair. Stephen, please, she said, let me explain. I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head. No need, Diana. I understand perfectly. I walked past Diana toward the exit, but stopped at the front desk where Powerflex Gym's manager was standing with his mouth open, clearly having watched the entire confrontation. You might want to review your trainer policies, I told him quietly, and maybe invest in better liability insurance. Then I turned back to Diana, who was still standing frozen in the middle of the gym floor, surrounded by people recording her humiliation. Diana, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "When you get home tonight, you'll find divorce papers on the kitchen table. My lawyer already has copies of the photos from your coffee dates with Jake, and the text messages. Amazing what a private investigator can dig up in 3 weeks." Her face went white. "You hired a detective?" "Special forces taught me to gather intelligence before engaging the enemy," I said. "Your boyfriend there made the mistake of thinking this was about muscles and attitude. You made the mistake of thinking I was too old and tired to notice what was happening in my own house." Diana looked around desperately, realizing that her affair was now public knowledge, documented on dozens of phones, probably already spreading across social media. "The house is in my name," I continued. "The cars are in my name. The bank accounts we opened when we got married. I closed those yesterday and moved the money. Legally, of course. Everything I did was completely legal." "You can't do this," she whispered. "Already done," I said. "Oh, and Diana, you might want to ask Jake about his job situation. I hear PowerFlex doesn't appreciate trainers who create this kind of publicity." I looked around the gym one last time, at the crowd still recording, at Jake's water bottle and towel abandoned by the weight rack where his humiliation began. "Enjoy your workout," I said, and walked out into the Denver evening air. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment in downtown Denver, reading the morning paper over coffee, when an article in the business section caught my eye. PowerFlex Gym had closed permanently after a series of viral videos damaged their reputation and led to multiple client cancellations. Jake Rodriguez had tried to find work at other fitness centers, but the videos of him getting dominated by a man 20 years older followed him everywhere. Last I'd heard, he was working at a supplement store in Aurora, his dreams of being a fitness influencer permanently destroyed by 30 minutes of footage. Diana had moved in with her sister after the divorce was finalized. She'd tried to fight for half the house, but the evidence of her affair made that impossible. Colorado had no-fault divorce laws, but adultery still mattered when it came to asset division. I'd started running again, something I hadn't done consistently since leaving the military. The trails around Washington Park reminded me why I'd loved Colorado in the first place. The mountains in the distance, the clean air, the sense of space and possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister in California. "Saw the gym videos online. Proud of you for handling it with class." I smiled and put the phone away. The videos had indeed gone viral, but not for the reasons Jake had hoped. They'd become a cautionary tale about the difference between looking tough and being tough, between muscles and actual strength. That evening, I drove up to the mountains and watched the sunset over the Rockies. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. Jake Rodriguez's life became a cautionary tale shared across Denver's fitness community, his humiliation replaying endlessly on social media as gym members used his failure as entertainment, destroying any chance he had of rebuilding his career in the industry he'd once dominated. Diana faced her own consequences when their affair became public knowledge, losing not only her marriage but also her standing in the social circles that had once welcomed her, forced to rebuild her life under the shadow of her very public betrayal. The viral videos served as permanent documentation of their choices, ensuring that neither could escape the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't violence or anger, but the patience to let people reveal their true character and face the natural consequences of their choices.